Hey everybody, this is Dieter School of Martial Science. So today, I want to first off start out by saying Happy Memorial Day to everybody. Um, I know that uh, I know that today's a sad day for those of us who lost brothers who've served. I think that really stretches out to first responders too. So not just military, not just veterans. So much respect to all of you guys that are out there keeping the peace on the job. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about something called green zone fighting. Green zone fighting is just that. Okay, it's safe zone. Okay, this is where you got to take a step to engage the enemy, or they got to take a step to you. Um, Very rarely do violent encounters happen in a green zone. Okay, when they do, that's nice. It gives you time to set up, gives you time to focus on your defense, on your offense. But in real life, it doesn't happen very often. So when it does, you still need to be prepared. So a lot of the techniques that I teach in green zone fighting are similar, if not exactly the same, as yellow zone fighting. One of the primary differences is, and this is where we get into this a little bit. In this, we cover more about blocks. Um, in the manual, we refer to this as intro to block, punch, kick, and movement. Um, in reality, uh, you don't really use blocks at close range fighting. Okay, quite frankly, there just ain't enough room to do all that. And if you do, you leave yourself open to a counterattack. So here's the thing. Okay, blocks defined. Most martial artists agree on this definition. Are techniques that you use to protect yourself against an opponent's strike whilst causing harm to them, which means that we use something known as Newton's laws of motion here, which is that an object in motion stays in motion unless an outside force acts upon it. So, simply put, you have stuff like your inside to outside forearm block, where the power comes. Can y'all hear that? From the forearm hitting the enemy. Okay. You have your outside to inside forearm block coming in. Okay. You have your up block, your down block. Same concepts. Um, you have your track blocks, which are both hands shooting out. Here, I'll show y'all real quick. So it's both hands shooting out like this, okay? Protecting you against the enemy while causing harm to their appendage that they use to strike you. Um, you have variants of the upward block, like the X block that comes up, okay? Trapping block. You have circular blocks, outside to inside, inside to outside, where you're using the motion to cause the harm. Um, you've got blocks you can use with your legs. Okay, you've got shin block where you block with the knee. You've got thigh block where you block with the thigh. You've got calf block where you block with the calf. Instep, you block with the instep. If you're going against soft tissue like the thigh when they're kicking you, knee block, same for the arms. You don't want to use that against the shin bone, you'll hurt your knee. So, um, you got variants like the elbow blocks where you're using the elbow to block the opponent's technique. Okay. Um, these are your blocks. Okay. As a general rule, I'm not a huge fan of blocks in my own personal style of fighting. Um, that's because my goal is always to minimize my damage. Understand a fight, most martial artists will agree with this too. A fight is a violent exchange of blows where both parties aim to injure the other. And generally speaking, both parties sustain damage. An assault, on the other hand, is when one person exchanges blows while not giving the other person a chance to recover nor defend themselves. I'm a big fan of assaults in my personal style of fighting. There's several reasons for this. One, I'm getting older. So, years and years of this stuff is tying in on me. So my body isn't as supple nor as quick to heal as it was I don't know how many fractures ago. Um, Another part of this is that again, um, it has to do with the personal choice. I believe in minimizing my damage because you're probably not going up against one assailant. So as a result, an assault is the only logical way to engage the enemy due to the fact that you need to quickly and swiftly overwhelm them and then move on to the next target. That said, ethically, I feel obligated to teach my students both to fight and to assault the enemy. And as such, we include these lessons because a lot of that is going to be personal choice, and it's also going to have to do with the situation and the scenario. Because remember my golden maxim, right? You got to be able to explain your conduct to the judge. Let me stress that one more time. You got to explain your conduct to the judge. Okay. So, understanding that that's the case, understanding that that's what you're going to be facing when you block somebody, you are going to sustain damage. No NFs about that. Only what thing that might happen if you're lucky is you get a bruise only to show for your trouble. Um, okay. Parries. I mentioned those earlier. Parries are not designed to block the enemy. They're not designed to cause injury. They're designed to move their attacking appendage offline, whether it be a headbutt, a leg, arm, even a torso strike. Okay, your objective there is always to just move it offline without causing impact. Okay, I mean a little bit of impact is unavoidable, right? But your goal is not to hit them with your technique. It's to just move it offline. Move it offline. Okay? Parries, as a result, are something I use a lot. Um, Parries are useful also because it's not a hard technique and their arm ain't flying away from you, right? You can parry into a wrist grab and use that to come in for the arm break. Use that to compound the fracture. Use that to move up to the shoulder. Use that to grip the shoulder at the nerve there, bringing the broken arm back over, further damaging it, right? Okay, using the inside of the forearm to crush the cricoid cartilage in the throat. You can do that with a parry because you're not so much as knocking their attack away from you as diverting its momentum. Um, Punches. Okay, there's a lot of different people out there, a lot of different styles, a lot of different schools. I've learned to punch in a variety of ways. Okay, I've learned to do the traditional, punch straight. Okay, use the pointer knuckles to cause the damage. To this day, one of the best punching techniques I found was when I was learning Wing Chun, and that's Hung Fai E, which loosely translates to interconnected fist. It uses the vertical of the punch. It uses a vertical punch where the impact is dissipated over all four knuckles, and it keeps the elbow tight, more like a vertical uppercut, allowing the whole body to be behind the technique. Um, I found this messes up my hands the least. That's why I like it. If you guys want to punch whatever way you want to feel comfortable, that's definitely more power to you. Um, I always think that it's important that you be comfortable with whatever technique you use to defend your life. If punching vertically doesn't appeal to you, learn the other way. Just know that when you do, you're going to be getting a lot of scars over them pointer knuckles. Okay? And I'm probably going to break your hands at least a couple of times. I know I have. Um, in my school, we teach both punches, okay? Both the horizontal and the vertical punch. We also teach hook punches um, from the boxing format, to be truthful. Um, I teach uppercuts. Um, Big fan of uppercuts. Won a lot of fights with those. That said, another technique we teach are palm heels. Okay, palm heels are where you take the palm of your hand, and you hit the enemy with it. Okay. We also teach knife hand techniques, which is exactly like I said. You're using the meat of the bottom of the hand to enact the hit. Okay. We teach ridge hands, where you're literally, if you all can see my hand, you see how my thumb is tucked? You're using the same meat to hit the enemy, okay? To hit the enemy. Um, I teach, I'm a big fan of finger jabs. However, you have to condition the hands to do that. So I do teach those. I'm a big fan of them to this day. I've never seen somebody ready to fight with you after you finger jabbed them in one of their kidneys. Okay? It takes the fight right up out of somebody. Those of you who've been hit in the kidneys know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, uh, I do teach extended knuckle strikes, right? Where you're extending the knuckle. There's a variety of ways to do that. You can do the extended knuckle where you're extending these two, just the one. You can do more like a bear claw where you're just extending all four of them. You can even use the thumb. I'm a big fan of that one. I once choked somebody out with the carotid artery choke with nothing other than my thumb and their hair. Um, uh, Once you condition the fingers properly, which is something we'll go into in another video, you're able to use the tips of your fingers to impact the enemy. These are useful for your basics, right? Carotid artery stun, um, eye gouging, nervous system disruptions, kidneys, as we mentioned before. One of my favorite techniques nowadays is collapse the lung, where I take all four of my fingers, I come up under the breastbone at an angle, and I keep pushing into the soft tissue past the diaphragm until I hit the lung. Um, uh, Fight finisher, very useful. Doesn't take very much time, and most people tend to leave the center of their chest unguarded. Um, uh, that pretty much sums up hands. Okay, I do teach backhand strikes and back fist, hammer fist, using the meat of the fist to come down in like a hammer. I teach the upward hammer fist where you're using the upward part. I particularly like that for jaw stuns or neck stuns, um, because it's easy to do. Um, that pretty much covers hands. I mean, it doesn't really matter what continent you're on. There's only so many ways you can use your hands to hurt the enemy. Um, Feet. Okay. This is one of the things this is an intro video to is kicking. In DSMS, I see absolutely no reason you should ever use a fully extended kick. By that I mean other than a knee strike, to anything higher than the knee itself. Um, there are martial arts out there like Taekwondo that prefer to use kicks to all areas of the body. I personally enjoy fighting Taekwondo practitioners because once I take their legs out of play, their hands aren't very good and their grappling skills are rudimentary at best. Um, so it's my fight. Um, to this day, if somebody gives me a leg, I break the kneecap in it before I give it back or the ankle. Um, I found that to be a good practice to living to a ripe old age. Um, it's harder for somebody to trap your leg up or block a kick that's going to the lower body, below the knee, I mean. Um, there's been a few times I've used techniques other than that. I remember one time when I was in school still, some kid, I had to put the whooping on him because he'd been bullying me. And I did a flying side kick over a lunch table and kicked him in his chest and basically won the fight that way. That's because the lunch table was in my way. Believe me, I figured I would lose time and be more vulnerable to a counter assault if I went around the table. Because, it's those old school lunchroom tables where they like 25, 35, 40 feet of lunch table. Okay. Um, so I just went over it. Um, that is why I still teach those techniques. Admittedly, that's usually to my advanced students. Why? Because you're not going to use it very often. Um, I once used a stepping side kick to kick somebody who was in a crowd. I needed to cross the distance. So I skipped over there, gave him a kick to the chest. That was mainly, again, I was younger, I was a little bit more showy. And also, I was fighting somebody who knew nothing about martial arts. So I was able to be a little more showy. And it was all about sending a message too. I didn't want to be bullied anymore, so I had to send a message. I had to hurt him in public, and I had to hurt him in the most showy way possible. That's contrary to how I train my students and contrary to how I fight normally. Very rarely do I choose to use public, showy, ostentatious techniques like flying or stepping kicks. The reason behind that is, like I said, it's an ineffective use of calories. Okay? And very rarely do you want to send a message, especially nowadays when everybody's so quick to call their lawyer and sue you. It's easier to just put them down before they know what hit them. Okay? Um, hopefully, they never even see your face. That way, they can't ID you. Uh, so, um, kicks. I teach the basics, okay? Front press kick or front kick, side kick. I don't teach back kick because I don't see any good reason for you to turn your back to the enemy nor extend yourself that way. Um, and if somebody's got you in a bear hug or something like that where the assault is coming from your back, you won't probably be able to get your leg up and kick it out there anyway. So I personally don't teach that. I mean, I can if you want me to. You got to request me to teach you some stuff like that because I don't see the use for it. At least not in a street fight. I teach crescent kicks, roundhouse kicks, inside to outside kicks. Crescent kicks, I mean, inside to outside round. One of the best techniques I found to this day is using an inside to outside roundhouse kick to collapse my opponent's knee. I mean, if I'm really lucky, I got a hold of their collar or their jaw or something, and I can actually use it as a throw and simultaneously ride my opponent to the ground, um, which is a great day. I like ground fighting. It's over quickly. Um, da, 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 da. I do, like I said, teach stepping and flying kicks, but that's more to advanced students. There's a certain amount of physicality that comes involved. It took me a very long time to master myself because I can't jump very high. I don't have a very high vertical leap. Um, so, uh, okay. I do occasionally teach my students a version of the crescent kick known as the wheel kick. Now, the wheel kick is not something you use very often, but it's always good for a good surprise technique, especially if your opponent's shooting at you. Most people shoot a gun at chest height. That's because most people are taught as marksmen to shoot at the chest. So to this day, I found the dragon kick or the wheel kick, whatever you want to call it, the drop spinning heel kick that takes out the ankles, to be very effective. Um, I Same reason I teach scissor leg takedowns. Okay, because sometimes if somebody's coming at you with a weapon at head level or chest level, it's easiest to get up underneath it. Um, okay. Another version of a kick that I use is known as the step kick. It's literally just that. You lift your knee up about as high as it'll go and step into your opponent. I use that primarily for rear assaults. When I'm teaching my students to collapse somebody's calf muscle or their knee, whatever you can get. That uses the instep, the broad part of the foot, to push their leg to the ground. This puts them on their knees, makes it easier for you to attack the vertebrae in the neck where people live at. Um, Plus, there's something demoralizing about being forced to your knees. A lot of times it takes the fight out of enemies, especially men. Um, okay. That covers all the kicks I teach. I like to keep kicks simple because, you know, really, truly, if you're using a kick, you had too much time on your hands. No way. Um. Uh. Okay. As far as movement. Okay. It's important you understand that as somebody who's studied both Chinese martial arts and Japanese martial arts, I have a different sense of movement than most. Most practitioners you'll meet have studied one family of martial arts, since Kaiji Kembo was heavily influenced by karate, as was Tang Soo Do. So they have more Japanese style movement. The Japanese believed in moving four compass points, front to back, side to side. Um, as we all have known from watching Bruce Lee movies, they preferred to move in circles, either 180 degrees or 360. They weren't too fond of moving in a straight line front to back. Um, so, in my own personal style, I use both patterns of movement, both circular and linear. Um, there's an old adage: move your feet, keep your head. I mean, you'll see everybody from boxing trainers to MMA to martial arts masters use that adage. That's because there's a lot of truth in it. A lot of truth. Um, so, an aspect. Let me know if you guys couldn't hear me in this part of the whatever. Because, yeah, so here's another part of it, okay? Um, this part is, needless to say, not something you're going to see very often, okay? But I got to be honest, I like both. Um, in my personal fighting style, I use both patterns of movement. I teach my students both patterns of movement. That's because I believe in order for a complete fighter to emerge, They need to be comfortable in all aspects of combat, okay? And they need to be able to think fluidly. So, switching between the movements helps my students think flexibly in their mind, avoid the tunnel vision that gets so many people into trouble. Even those of us experienced or old enough to know better. Um, so, circular movement is just like it sounds. You're moving around your opponent, usually to the safe side, to quote my old Krav Maga instructor, versus the live side, where they're able to, where their weapon is, whether it's the fist, the leg, whatever. Usually that involves waiting till your opponent's already overextended themselves by throwing a technique. That's how you determine what side is safe and what side isn't. To that end, I'm not a big fan. I don't believe in waiting for your opponent to get a hit off. Um, that said, linear movement is just that, front to back. To this day, one of my favorite steps is the L step. You take one step forward with your lead leg. As your trail leg comes up, you step out to the side. Then you step with your lead leg that initiated the step forward. This is known as the L step. It's sort of a merging of linear and circular movement, putting you on the blind side of your opponent, um, preferably with their back to you. That's where I like to start a lot of my fights. Um, uh, that said, um, linear movement, just like the opposite of circular. Okay, you're moving forward, step towards the opponent, step back, step to the side. Um, in my experience, stepping back only leads to a continuation of your opponent's momentum. It doesn't change the dynamics of the fight. So I'm not a huge fan of stepping back. I have sometimes needed to, um, because they were swinging something like a baseball bat, for example. So you have to step back out of range and then move forward after the apex of the swing passes you. It's devilishly tricky to those of that are cops. They know it's devilishly tricky to pull an ASP baton back mid strike and then switch directions. Um, it takes it doesn't happen easy, and you're usually gonna hyperflex the elbow. So as a result, uh, that's why I prefer to step back in that particular case. If you're being sworn at by a blunt object, for example. Same's true for blades, although nowadays it's highly unlikely y'all will go up against a swordsman, and if you do, he's probably not very good with it. Um, that said, defense against a blunt object is simple. You can either rush into your opponent before they can complete the swing, or you can step back, wait for the swing to pass you, and then move forward into the space in between, them recalibrating after the miss. Um, Regardless, if you stay in place, you're fixing to get hurt. Uh, Another form of movement um, plays into our tactical shooting over there in lesson 5, which is known as the combat glide. It's a heel toe stride with the knees bent, that allows you to keep your shoulders from bobbing up and down like normally when people walk. Um, I tend to use the combat glide when I fight. I'm not sure if that was because I was a gunfighter first or a martial artist second, or if it's just a curious fusion of the two. Um, I just do. Um, the drawbacks to different forms of movement. Well, heel to toe is noisy. Okay, because the heel striking solid ground, it makes a noise. However, it's better for soft ground when you're walking on the woods, for example. That's why that particular stride has also been called the woodsman's stride or the woodsman's walk. Um, okay. Um, how most of us walk naturally from birth. We step forward with the ball of the foot and roll back towards the heel. That particular technique is useful if you're going upstairs, or if you're walking across boards, or if you're walking across hard surfaces that you need to move quickly and be able to pivot on, such as ice. I once got into a fight with somebody on a frozen lake. I used that particular method of stepping. Um, you have something known as the catwalk, where your heels never touch the ground. Again, useful for creeping up on your assailant on hard terrain or if you're on ice. Um, uh, you have your flat foot walk, where you're literally stepping forward and putting all of your flat of your foot down at once. This one's noisy. However, it's best on loose gravel or loose dirt so you don't lose your footing. Um, So, learning different methods of walking is useful for our craft because it helps us to fight on all terrain. It has been my considerable experience that fights never, ever, ever, ever happen when you want them to. Um, okay. When I get back with you guys next time, we're going to be talking about lesson 8, okay? And that's going to be yellow zone fighting. Yellow zone fighting is going to be basically a repeat of green zone techniques. The only difference is you're not going to be stepping towards the opponent, stepping back, stepping around, or stepping to the side of them. At this point in time, green zone fighting, you're usually squared with your opponent and you're exchanging blows, you're striking, and your objective is to move towards the finish of the fight. Um, um, as always, I stress constant vigilance and like, share, subscribe. And happy Memorial Day to everybody. And to the brothers that didn't make it, just know you're remembered and loved. Um, and we remember your sacrifice. All right, till next time. Constant vigilance. Stay safe. Stay aware.